I could tell something was coming, but I couldn't really judge.
That might be more
So, yeah, the
Thank you.
until you have stuff right in front of them, you think they're that. I'd wear the glasses.
It'd be a while.
Yeah, I'd wear the glasses.
Just one more item to the list.
There's a layer, there's a layer of regulations.
You got a couple minutes after the meeting. Got something I'd like to.
I'm just curious.
Tell when it's the present, so.
I mean, I was I get that.
That rain.
I had our sales.
It's still.
They're not right.
I did, I remember it. Yes, I.
I sure down trying to fix Charlie.
One of these weekends, I'd like to borrow your trailer again.
Coming up, Blake.
But now Dad's garage door is staying around there. I knew we shouldn't have gotten those chairs. Yeah. They stay long enough.
I've sat with you. Yeah, I know.
The white ones are bad. They didn't work.
No, they are bad. Yeah.
I feel like I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and then we go to
We had a couple servers. Come there. One of them. One of them got into the girls. Didn't want to come back. We were stuck in the line. It was like, thank you. They haven't made sense.
You don't think it's
That's why I'm here. Yeah, I love hearing about that.
It's going.
Fly out to where the grass
And he's already checked.
Yeah, he got fired.
It's like 80s and 90s. We took a walk through the secluded island. Yeah, it's nice.
This would be the
Had to be different. But, you know, I don't. I don't want to live that beach.
I don't know, I just hired him. Probably go to 6. Is your voice still? We could be doing 6 this week.
So it's, that was our, so, you know, Florida was our. It was good.
Yes.
So. I only use so much.
Well, what I read was the air company sold out before. Really? Well, they tried to generate everything right down.
End of July. And I'm going to. So.
Selling all the assets to generate the cash. There's no way they got
They
it.
just scheduling for anything. That's what we're all fighting on, saving real estate.
Maybe she's just here to encourage us to.
I should have had this at the stadium.
Put it down.
Should have had the meeting at the stadium.
Stadium isn't air conditioned.
Yes, it's really. Jeff, we had a lot Yeah, a lot of those closed.
Oh, yes, yes. But I did.
All right, everybody, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We can all rise for the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nick, call the roll for us.
Yes, Matt Bugera,
I am here.
John Leo,
I am here.
Nancy Rondell, Al Dyka here, and John Cox here. We do have a quorum.
Moving right along, it's time for citizens' comment. If you have something that's not on the agenda, this is your chance. Mr. Mulder.
Hi, council members. I'm Phil Mulder, for those who don't know me, and I'm reporting from the planning commission, so no action required from the council. This is for information only. And as you know, we're working hard on updating the master plan for the city. And there are some key questions that we felt we needed public input on, and those revolve around housing. And these are some of the macro questions that we're all going to be facing soon, like Should we have housing in the city for all income levels and all family sizes and all stages of life? Should we encourage younger people to join our community? So big questions like that. And we're going to have a public meeting 2 weeks from tomorrow, the 22nd. And everybody's invited, residents, non-residents, business owners, employees, full-time, part-time, everybody who'd like to participate. It's going to be kind of a guided discussion. You have 4 key questions. And the environment's going to be kind of like a focus group. So it's, people are invited to come think these issues through with us. And we're going to keep it productive, fast-paced, and everybody's going to have a chance to participate. So no action required from council other than if you care to come as an observer, you'd be welcome. But a subcommittee of the Planning Commission is going to run it all. And hopefully bring back some great input for us and for you. That's it.
Time is it?
What time and where?
6 p.m. right here. 6 to 7:30,
What date again?
22nd, 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Maybe we should have it at the stadium.
All right, thank you, Bill. Anyone else? Once? No, someone in the back there?
Someone in the front.
I'm Martin Olin and I live here year round. And I'm glad to hear that this is happening because I don't live in a neighborhood anymore. And I totally get that we need affordable housing for people who want to live and work here year round. And we need, I know there's a solution. Somebody may have to bite the bullet, but it's getting out of hand. And it's to the point where Chief can possibly speak to this, is I'm concerned about the security and safety that I've enjoyed living up here. When you've got so many people who are here for 3 days, no responsibility. That's it. Thank you. I'll be there.
In the back, sir?
My name's Rick Tarczynski. I live at 465 State Street in Harbor. And I'm concerned about short-term rentals in my neighborhood.
We've got that on our discussion tonight.
Is it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought it wasn't on here. Oh, wait. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Back.
Good evening. Rebecca Backes. I've seen the new solar panels going on. They're on the firehouse now and on the bathroom, and now they're going up on the skate park. And I was wondering what the return on investment is on those panels. When do we get our bait back? The cost of that equipment.
So assuming they work full capacity, probably around 20 years, could be 22, it could be less, but yep, probably about 2 decades. I can get you an exact number on that though, if you email me.
Okay, so in 2 decades they're paid for, and in 2 decades they're obsolete again.
That's not necessarily true. Solar panels, they're guaranteed and warranted for 25 to 30 years, but they last much longer than that. They can last for another 25 years.
So 20 years they're paid for. And is that energy being dumped back in the grid, or is it powering
So
the
that
firehouse?
that electricity is powering our municipal buildings and any excess, our municipal buildings that they're on. So the solar panels on the fire station, the solar panels on the Ford Park building and the skate park are powering those buildings, and any excess energy produced, especially at the Ford Park, are given back to our grid, which then we sell back to our customers.
Okay, then one more question. When I was up at the firehouse to look at these panels, there's this huge cat generator next door to the fire.
It's the city backup.
City backup, yeah.
For the whole city, or is that?
That's been there for many decades. That is a backup for a section of the school is designated as a shelter, safe shelter area in case of some sort of emergency. And that generator will back up that region up there. And then as much power as we can get out of it to go residential. So when the power's out, if it's out for a length of time, we can power up small portions of the grid locally.
So has it ever been used?
It comes on intermittently to run, and then it comes on
Just to test it out?
in the event of a major power outage, big storms, the kind of thing. I think it has maybe run it half a dozen times. For storms and things like that. It also powers, in the event of a power outage, it powers the well house that's right there.
Okay.
So it's actually got nothing to do with the fire station. We're not even
I-
tied
I
into it, but
I
it's,
didn't think it did because it's huge.
no, it powers that well right there. So the city will always have water flowing.
Okay. Thank you.
What else? So we can move into the consent agenda. We're happy with the.
I'm very happy with that. I'll make a motion to approve it.
Wow, you are happy.
Clerk
I'll second.
Whitaker, did we have one change? Yeah.
I'll amend my motion.
So I have a motion with a correction that Nancy found in the minutes, just a word change. I'll take care of that. So I have a motion by Dyke and a second by and John Leo,
Yes.
Matt McGuire,
Yes.
John Cops,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yeah.
And Al Dyke.
Yes.
Motion carried.
On to the 4th of July.
Yes, all right, the first agenda item is the 4th of July parade. So, as you guys read in my memo, starting July 1st, the state is lifting all of its major epidemic orders related to gathering limits and social distancing. So there'll be no limits for 4th of July for how many people can attend an event and how they need to be spaced out. There's still a recommendation that those who are unvaccinated wear face masks, but otherwise there will be no limits. Right now, there's still until July 1st limits on indoor events, but not on outdoor events. And other related news, the positivity rate is we have very few cases in Emmett County in the past 2 weeks, 0 or 1 cases per day. It's been declining. The vaccination rate in Emmett County is one of the highest in the state and the country. So our residents are up there around 65 or 66% with their, and by 4th of July, it'll be above 70% with the way the trends are going. So those are all the positive things. Of course, with holding the 4th of July parade, with that many people in town, there will undoubtedly be some sort of increase in COVID cases, related cases. There with that many crowds, just with people gathering, parade or no parade, the amount of people will be here. But it won't reach any, based on the health department's understanding, any kind of epidemic level. There'll probably be an increase in cases, but not something that we should worry about as far as a pandemic aspect. So I think given all that information, I would recommend going forward with the parade based on the fact that the guidance of the health department, they serve as the Northwest Health Department, State Health Department, they serve as our health experts. And so we have to rely on them. So based on them saying it is safe, we can do it. It's up to council to decide whether we should. I recommend we do it based on that. But if council has any other opinions or questions they want answered, I can try to answer those.
Let's have a parade.
I've been tracking the numbers, I agree. It's time to open up.
I think it'll be fine. It's outdoor event.
People who aren't comfortable don't have to come.
That's right. Or wear a mask. Or both. I'll make a motion that we approve the 4th of July parade. Second.
Al Dyke,
Yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
John Cops,
Yes.
and Matt McGuire.
Yes.
Motion carried. Parade it is.
Just real quick, while we're on the 4th of July parade, and July 15th at 19, I brought up about our the chair policy, and we didn't revisit last year because we didn't have a parade. So for those of you that weren't here, there's a 9 o'clock time when people could put chairs out for the parade. And I came to July 15th because that July 4th that year was sort of a catastrophe on our end because people were putting chairs out. We were driving around the block, put ton of foot back, and it was back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then they don't like us, we don't like them, and it creates sort of this hatred. And so my proposal would be, is I want to sort of lay the groundwork for the next council meeting of maybe having a 6:30 time to put the chairs out in the morning, and also assess some type of penalty, like a civil infraction, and talk to Mr. Raymer, that if you were to put them out prior to 6:30, that you could be assessed at like a $50 civil infraction penalty, or we could work that into some type of ordinance. So if that's okay, I'd come back with some type of groundwork for the next meeting, just to, the 9 o'clock doesn't work. They're gonna have the Paul Revere run, that starts at 8 and 8:15. That consumes at least 4 of our officers, which leaves between us and police and that, and trying to police the chairs, or else we just don't enforce the chairs, period. But the 9 o'clock doesn't work very well. So I'm open to any suggestion. I thought if people want to put chair out 6:30 and get up that early to do it, they would have 9 o'clock is unfortunately too convenient. The runners are running and the people are running to put chairs out. And so I will, if that's all right, I'll at least come back with and talk to Mr. Raymer, come back with some type of like ordinance or something like that. Because currently it's under a traffic control order. It was made in 2015-01-2015. That's the traffic control order. We might be able to incorporate updated one under a new traffic control order. Is that all right? At least to look at it?
Yeah, good, take a look at it, see.
All right, thank you.
I think it's an unsolvable problem.
I hear you there. I just remember going around the block with a guy that was in his 50s, and it was like a child. It was every time I went around the block, he looked at me, and I finally like, I was sort of upset. He was upset. I'm like, really? You know, and so I don't, it's not good for us, it's good for people. So, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Agenda item B, the Take Two Condo Association at 280 East Main Street. It's a site plan amendment. The reason the site plan amendment is coming to council, if you remember, council, for those of you that were on council, this is a planned unit development that is a kind of a special agreement based from the zoning code. It requires both the planning commission approval as well as council approval. Since council approved the overall agreement, any amendment to that agreement needs to be approved by council as well. The applicant is JT Charles, who I believe is here with us, would like to place an air conditioning unit on the property between the 2 residential buildings. The primary concern that staff and one neighboring resident had was the potential noise from the air conditioning unit. The noise, I believe, had a rating of 67 decibels, but I wasn't here for that meeting. Is that the correct number? 67 decibels. While the decibel level for the central business district is 70. After some discussion and public comment, the planning commission recommended approval 5-1. They based this approval on the project meeting the requirements of the code. The applicant installing a privacy fence around the unit and the letters of support by neighbors. There, like I mentioned, there was one residential neighbor who was concerned about the noise, but there were a few other issued their letter of support. I would say, unless council has unanswered questions, I would recommend approval based on planning commission's recommendation. On a side note, I did receive a question from Councilmember Dyke about the noise, believing that there's 4 units there, 4 air conditioning units, and then if the noise combined together would increase it. So for example, if they're all running at the same time, would there be an increased noise greater than 67? And after talking to Benchmark, which they didn't really have the expertise, but they did a little research and found that yes, it would increase the noise. We didn't get a firm answer about how many 4 units would, but an additional unit, let's say running at 67, would increase it to 70 decibels, which is the limit for that district. So I don't know how many 4 would go
Which
together.
essentially doubles the noise level.
Well, it doesn't double the decibel. It doesn't double the decibel level, but it
Increases.
When you have the 2 identical units running side by side, the second unit will raise it by 2.73.
So the sound
decibels.
energy, yeah.
And that equates to doubling the amount of noise. That's the way I read that letter today. And
Is this open to public comment?
So it will be. It will be. Jeff, can you add anything? Because you were at that meeting.
Absolutely. So, and I believe there's 4 units altogether. There's 3 air conditioning units between the 2 residential homes. And then to the north of one of the residential homes is an electric generator. And the information that we got for the planning commission with the specs for those items, the at load decibel level for each of those items is 67 decibels. When the electric generator is in its test mode, which is probably what we'll hear the most, that's only 57 decibels. But that's another key note to mention here is that's at a distance of 23 feet. And from looking at the site plan, I believe that from the exterior property lines where this whole condominium project borders neighboring properties, these items are farther than 23 feet from those exterior property lines. So I think that the measured decibel level would be lower than this at that distance, which is where our zoning code measures that with the 70 decibel limit for properties. And I'll answer any questions.
I guess my simple solution, is there any way you could build a dome of silence around them?
That's an open question. There is going to be a privacy fence that sits, I'm sorry, I'm Nick Lieber, project architect for the entire project and representing Charles as well. There is going to be a solid privacy fence that screens this from the Take Two condo buildings as well, which will help contain the noise. For reference, the test of the generator runs at 55 decibels. That's the average sound that your refrigerator makes when it's running every day. And that runs for 5 minutes, 1 day a week. And we can set the time for what that looks like. And kind of on an acoustic level of things, 2 generators running at 60 decibels side by side don't produce 120 decibels. It's not a true doubling. It does increase the sound. To increase it by 10 decibels would be doubling at that point in time. So that's.
I disagree. I got the report from our engineering firm today. If you increase it by 10 decibels, that's an effective increase in sound output of 100 times. It's logarithmic.
I respectfully disagree, sir. I have a degree that we've studied this extensively. You can look at it. It's 10 decibels. I'm going to have an argument about acoustics here in the public forum, but I can assure you that is what the rating is.
So anyways, I guess back to my point, is there any way you could put some sound deadening?
They have sound attenuating, and that once it gets installed, the intention is install it. We're trying to solve a problem that isn't even a problem yet. So the intention is install it, get the air condensers in there, and then we'll work on the fencing and figure out what type of abatement we have to do. We can do sound tests on it. The goal is to get them installed, and we will take care of it if it's an issue or to do anything to abate the sound. There's several different types of panels that you can put on the inside of privacy fences. Before we get to that point, the first step is, what does the privacy fence do? Let's measure the decibels with the privacy fence in. If we find that it's higher than what we expected it to be, higher than actually 62 for the air condensing units, higher than the 57 for the generator when it cycles once, a week for 5 minutes, then we'll work on the type of panels. But we can't start working on the type of abatement on those panels until we get the privacy fence in. I think that's kind of the sequence of where do we start? Let's get them installed. Let's install the privacy fence and then figure out if we need additional abatement on that.
And part of it is just a reference point. One of the pieces of information that we had in our packet for the planning commission, I don't know if that made it to you folks tonight as well, was a decibel reading from the garbage truck, which is going to come at the same frequency. What this is going to runs at 16 times the volume level. So if you think about that, just the garbage coming and picking it up every morning at the dumpster, which is located right on the property lines, 16 times more intrusive than this electrical equipment is going to be. So although it seems like a high number, we're really talking about a very inconspicuous noise as you think about the siren that goes off in town and a leaf blower and all the other sounds that affect in the city.
That on the left where the bracket is an idea of what 57 decibels is what the generator runs at. And it's test cycle mode.
So the reason, because we have a decibel limit level level limit in our zoning code, so.
Because this is residential.
Well, it's even in CBD, it is a residential unit in a CBD district, so that's the reason, yeah.
I just think it's more of an issue between the two homeowners, if they're okay with it. The planning commission is okay with it. Sound could leak out into the possibly.
Yeah, you could ask Pete Wong that question.
Yeah.
And see if he agrees. You could ask Pete Wong that question and see if he agrees. The county sheriff.
Walking down through town, no different than walking through town in July and, or even right now for that matter, listening to everybody, you know, all the businesses. Air conditioners and different things.
Well, I think the matter isn't, it's really just about, does it comply with the zoning code? And that's the question that's at hand. So do we approve the site amendment based on the information presented? Does it comply with the zoning code? And the questions that we posed to the planning commission, you know, there was some questions that Jeff, correct me, but there were some questions about the units running together where that reverb would, you know, put out additional output of noise. Then that's the question essentially that Councilmember Dyke emailed to me. And then Mayor, as you're asking, you know, is there a solution that, you know, we probably could get a more technical debate about and do some more research if need be, to find some sound engineer to actually look into that and what could be done, and is this really going to exceed that 70 that's in the CBD district or not? And that could be a solution. That's where council wants to go, or we can ask for some sort of, as you were asking for, extra sound abatement measure to ensure that it doesn't exceed that.
Is it possible to put the generator between the two buildings? And not have it out in the driveway area? I guess more common area where the noise could be heard to the neighbors. Keep them muffled between the two buildings.
You're talking about this proposed generator?
Yeah. Beyond my only question, I guess.
It is possible. I mean, it could be located anywhere. You know, it was located where it was to try to provide a little bit more sound buffer for the residents at 275. And also keep that generator from acting what essentially becomes a sound tunnel out towards the park on the harbor side.
Gotcha.
So this screens as much as we can from the harbor, puts it up against the commercial side and the parking side of the development where you've got the greatest distance between that unit and any property line.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It would also allow us to put fences on either side of it, should that be necessary. Right now, would be the privacy fence on the take two side between our home at 285. So if we need to put two more sides on it, then we can do that, then we can further add sound abatement to that side. So
That makes sense.
that was kind of the ideal spot for it.
Question for Jeff. The specification of 70 dB, is it per address, per unit, per? How's it? I know how you measure sound, but we're talking about multiple units here. What's the specifications?
I'd have to go back and look at the zoning code, but I believe what it says is that you measure the sound at the property line. So if there's multiple items adding to that, we'll have to use, I guess, our judgment as the zoning administrator and the police department. They have the decibel meter to know what items are contributing to that noise that we're hearing when we measure it at the property line.
I don't remember that coming up at the planning commission.
I don't know if that question was specifically asked at that time, but that would be the process.
Is the only issue with it the noise? Is there anything else that these units like are encroaching on or anything else? Is it just the noise that we're talking about?
We did have a long discussion about this at the planning commission. Pete Wallen did comment, and he said that he was also representing the Omarts who were next door. They were the only ones that really had any concerns regarding the project and the changes to the plan. And their only concern seemed to be noise. They did mention something about the safety of whether
the
or not the
generator,
item
he
might
was
be hit
concerned
or
about
not.
is it natural gas or electric? I don't.
Yeah, there
remember
was a
which
small
was.
concern about that, but
Yeah.
we did discuss that, and when you mentioned that there was going to be a fence.
So
kind
that
of
someone
protecting
couldn't
it,
back
that
into
didn't
it.
seem to be concerning.
This was discussed in great detail at the planning commission, certainly to my satisfaction. I think the design has met the criteria, and I would make a motion to support the planning commission decision to approve it.
second that.
John Cox,
Yes.
Al Dyke,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
Matt Boudreau,
Yes.
and John Leo.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. All right. Item C is Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. I won't spend too much time on this. I'm sure you read my memo. I do not feel at this point that this is an issue we should spend resources on. I don't necessarily disagree or agree with the act, but I think we have other important things to focus on federal legislation right now. It would take a lot of time and resources for staff to come up with a analysis because it's such a convoluted topic. We are doing a lot for renewable energy on the local level, so I feel like we're doing our part, but this is something just can be too convoluted and too complex. Unless council really wants to spend time on this, whether or not we should support this or not, I just feel like it would take me quite a bit of time to do some thorough, objective analysis. So my suggestion is just, if council members on their own want to take it up and contact their representatives or anyone in the public, that's fine, but as a whole, I don't think it's worth our time at this point. But I do appreciate Ron for coming and making that presentation. You know, it's good to open our eyes up to national and state issues.
Complicated topic. No, I agree.
Yeah. I'll follow your recommendation there.
Thanks. All right. Moving on to item 3D, which is an update on short-term rentals. So there have been a few statewide developments, and as you probably saw in my memo there, we have two bills going through state legislature, one through the state house and one through the state senate. They're essentially the same bills. What they would essentially do is take away local municipalities' ability to regulate short-term rentals for things other than noise and other nuisance-related types of activities. But it would revoke our ability to issue short-term licenses and our ability to control where and how many, if we ever chose to do so, short-term rentals there are. So the planning commission reviewed this and they recommend that council take an action of expressing their opposition to these two bills that are in the House and the Senate. And I spoke with our representative, John DeMoose. He's one of the one or two, I think, Republicans at least that are opposed to these bills. So there seems to be a lot of support in favor of taking away local control of these short-term rentals issues. So, but he's in opposition. It would help him, you know, if we had some sort of just statement from our council saying we want to retain local control. This doesn't mean we take a side on whether or not we should have or shouldn't have short-term rentals or increase or decrease them, but it says we want to be in control of that. So that's one issue. The second issue there is, and Jeff can maybe give an update about this, is that Supreme Court case about short-term rentals. Jeff, if you want to just a few sentences on that.
Yeah, so the Michigan Supreme Court had a decision recently, and they kind of had a dual side to this ruling. One side was in favor of the applicant that wanted to do short-term rental and was denied a license, and they kind of ruled in that person's favor to some degree regarding whether short-term rental occupants, whether that's a temporary in nature item. The other side, they ended up ruling in favor of the municipality, and I believe this is Silver Lake Township. And they, in that jurisdiction, short-term rental use very closely also mimics their definition of a motel. And motels were not permitted within the zoning district that the person wanted to do it. So they ended up denying and ruling in favor of the municipality because of that. But it basically, it brings up a good thought that we should probably relook at the nature of our short-term rental license and how that temporary nature may affect our short-term license that we have it. And then also looking at our definitions for things like hotels, motels. We have a couple other ones that may be somewhat similar, like boarding houses or rooming houses, and making sure that we don't have any conflicts there that would prevent us from managing short-term rentals appropriately.
And so this probably obviously depends on what the state does, right? If the state passes those bills, then, you know, it's kind of a moot point.
We'll have a lot less control.
Yes. So my recommended action is to make just a motion expressing our opposition to giving away local control. So opposition to those two bills. And I do know we have a few people here that want to have public comment on short-term rentals. So I also recommend hearing them out.
All right, let's take care of business first. I'll make a motion that way. Voice our displeasure with the people in Lansing.
We should maintain local control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, John Cups,
Yeah.
John Leo,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
Matt Bogira,
Yes.
Nell Dyka.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Victor, when do you think those bills are gonna come through? What's the
Well-
timeline on?
The House bill was going to be on the floor last week, but I know some of the representatives talked the speaker from putting it on the floor because they still want to talk to their constituents about it. But the House bill probably is coming sooner than later. The Senate bill is a little more delayed than the House bill, but it could be any time now.
All right, we have a couple people who wanted to talk about short-term rentals.
Hi, my name's Larry Harris. I live at 145 West Summit. And I apologize because public speaking is not my expertise. And so I appreciate your patience. And I'm going to be doing a little reading, so I appreciate that. As a citizen, I've been here since 2000. I love this city, I love the community, and I went so far as to move a house right behind here at the end of Zoll Street up to Summit and spent painfully 12 years restoring it. Dick Crawford, Marty Van Berlo, very patient with me going through that process. And we were talking about income and wanting to be here and having places. You know, I spent my whole life working. I finally put my 4 kids through college, got them married, and I finally muster up enough money to move up here and get a property, because I like the community, I like the neighborhoods, and I just have, and I just feel like with these short-term rentals that it's really, it's beginning to, I think it's changing the whole community in terms of having regular neighbors saying hi to them and having people constantly in and out of the the cars and the homes and the multiple people. In my neighborhood, there is approximately, with what Verbo shows and what is shown on Airbnb, there could be up to 50 people roaming around. And I've got one right next door to me. Nice people. I mean, folks that own it, wonderful folks. But, they're in Bloomfield Hills. They're renting their place. And, my wife and I were, we go to bed at, I'm still creeping up on 70. We go to bed at, 10 or 11 o'clock, and noise in the backyard, fires going, smoke bellowing in our windows. I don't call anybody. I don't like to complain, but it just seems like under the radar that, and not meaning that there was anything nefarious going on here, but it just seems like for the residents of the community, under the radar, all of a sudden, all of these places have popped up. So, I guess to really start off, it seems like one of the big issues, it seems like the city has dismissed the idea that short-term rentals are not a business activity. And for me, this notion is misguided. So in essence, I'm going to refer to the insurance industry. The insurance industry actuarials have measured these types of risks for years. So in essence, almost as long as they've been in existence. And so to illustrate, I'll give you the Cliff Note version.
Larry, we've got a 3-minute time limit and you're at 4 minutes already. So if you could give us really give us the cliff notes on this because other people want to speak.
And I need another half hour. I didn't know that. I need to learn how to talk faster. So anyway, all right, then I'm just going to leave it at that. The insurance industry has defined if you have a homeowner's policy and you want to rent a house for a couple of weeks maximum, no problem. Homeowner's insurance policy, A-OK. But beyond that, you need to have a rental dwelling policy, different coverages, liability, and it's an increased risk, increased premium. So I'll stop there. So, the other thing I want to point out is while the VRB owners have voiced their opinion that the council should be mindful of the fact that many city residents, while they have been silent, are not in favor of short-term rentals. The primary reason the city council or city officials have not heard the voices of local residents' objection is due to the fact the property owners of short-term rentals, for some reason, were not required to obtain a variance, which would have been mandatory for the city to notify the surrounding residents to voice their opinion before any approval. In essence, this activity was perpetuating itself without the residents' knowledge. Recently, I was also surprised to hear in contrast to the recommendations to the city council, they recently removed the terms single family residential. I was shocked at that from the acknowledgement section of the short-term operation agreement. This was disappointing and clearly will not solve the core issue of residential zone properties used in hotels. A couple of noteworthy points. The ordinance provides no density restrictions in each residential district and provides no building or safety requirements that should be required for short-term hotel, I use hotel rentals. I highly recommend the city council spend some time reviewing short-term rental ordinance surrounding the communities before any further changes or amendments to our current ordinance. Doing some personal investigation, I found that the city of Petoskey on June 1st, 2014 will only allow short-term rentals in the business district, going to my point of a business activity. City of Charlevoix has caps on each individual residential district for short-term rentals and waiting lists for property owners interested in short-term business. That's some concrete stuff to put your hand on. And I'll be quick.
Time's up. We
Yeah,
gotta keep moving.
I got plenty of good stuff.
I would like to say something.
Yes, ma'am.
I want Larry to finish. Take my time, Larry, and finish what you were saying, because he's
He's already
truly
used your
speaking for
time,
so
ma'am.
many of us. Pardon?
He's already used your time.
My time too?
Yes.
Oh, who else wants to volunteer your time? Larry's got it.
I know. I've already heard Larry's thing, Dana.
I'd like to offer a counterpoint, and I'd like to invite everybody to come over to our house at 372 West Summit, Dana and Bill Mulder. I think in the last couple of years, we've probably had 5 properties turn over on Summit, and almost all of them are rented out, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's where we take a little different position. We've actually gotten to know some of the renters, be it they're there for a couple of weeks, just really nice people. Or we've got another family whose kids are on a ski team and they help pay for their property by renting it out when they're not there. So I'm somewhat sympathetic to that. I think that what we need to focus on is more of a behavioral approach to it, like how do we control behaviors we don't like what Larry was describing. And maybe it's okay if people have a summer home or they want to rent it out once in a while, but maybe we focus on how to keep our neighborhoods, happy and everybody happy and not a lot of noise at 2 in the morning. Silence.
No, well,
Should be addressed to the
concur, I
council.
agree.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
on discussion.
Yeah.
Hi, Phil Harmon, 548 Harrison Street. I'm in agreement with Larry. We moved here about 20 years ago. And put a lot of time and money in our investment in the home. And it's a great single family neighborhood. In fact, I had a gentleman this weekend tell me sitting in my driveway that this was heaven. But I now have a rental unit, 2 houses away from me across the street. I have a rental unit, 2 houses to my right of me on the same street. I have another rental unit, 2 homes behind me in the alley. And then I have a home right next to me on the left side, which is now a short-term rental. And it's closer to my home than my garage is to my house. And it's to a point where we are now considering possibly leaving the area because of it. My wife is really upset over the whole situation. I mean, the short-termers come in, you know, all the lights are on in the home, which are coming right in our house. They have the floodlights directly. We had to have that changed. And we don't know who's going to be there week after week after week. And it's just getting to a point. I've called the neighbors across the street, both of them. They both are in agreement that they're against the short-term rentals. And the neighbor to my right is also in agreement. So I know Mackinac Island, I think, also just put in an agreement where you have to at least rent for a month if you're going to do a home rental on Mackinac. I know Larry mentioned Charlevoix. I think Ann Arbor is also
Ann Arbor,
doing
yep.
something. So anyway, I'd like to at least the council to consider that and take our views into consideration, because there's a lot of people in our area. I think there's 88 rooms now in a couple block area for rent. And it's getting to a point where it's not a neighborhood anymore. So, thank you.
Thank you. We are watching the situation, trying to make everyone happy. Anyway, Rick?
Hi, Rick Tarchinsky, 465 State Street. I've been involved in this short-term rental stuff ever since the house next door to me became one. When I bought my house in 2013, I bought a house in a residential neighborhood where I knew my neighbors, and I didn't lock my car, I didn't lock my doors because I felt safe. I had a nice house that was dark at night. Now somebody's moved in every week, it's a new face. I lock my house, I lock my car, I don't feel safe. They leave all the lights on, I no longer have dark sky. They have bonfires at night, the smoke fills my house. I have to turn on the exhaust fan on my stove to blow it back, and it doesn't help much. I don't understand why they don't have to get approval of everybody within 500 feet of a unit that changes from a residential building to a hotel. It seems to me in the business district, there are regulations that if you have a use change in a property, there has to be approval. We should be able to have the same insight on what happens next door to us. The whole city is changing. When I moved in, it was a resort area, and everybody catered to the resort people because they wanted them to come. But over the years I've been here, Harbor Springs is slowly evolving, getting quicker into a full-time residency community. We don't need short-term people coming in here. We've got people coming now to set roots down here and live out their lives. And I think we need to be able to live in peace and quiet without all this constant changeover in neighbors. It's time to stop catering to resort people and start catering to the residents in town who vote for who's on what committees and everything. So I hope you guys will move forward on this decision to look into it, because the longer you delay, the more housing units are going to be grandfathered into anything you do. And setting a limit of 100 it's almost maxed out already, and I'm sure it'll get extended. So please act quickly and keep us residents in mind, and not the out-of-towners who are taking money out of the town instead of having people pay hotels and money staying here. Thank you.
I can wrap up. So I'd, everyone who spoke tonight against short-term rentals and in favor of some regulation of them, ought to be sure to write your two representatives tomorrow, your state rep and your state senator, John DeMoose and Wayne Schmidt. And so that's the best thing you can do. Council has just taken a position where the city is coming out in favor of local control. So we're not going to have any control if either of these bills, makes it to the floor and gets approved. So there's your first action item. Let's all do it.
By the way, it's easy to do. Michigan.gov, you can contact them right away.
I would like to hear, when I'm done, from law enforcement, how, or from anybody who's gonna enforce any kind of rules. Apparently, we don't have rules about this right now. But eventually, we're gonna want some rules, some guidance. Maybe that should have happened a couple of years ago. Apparently it didn't. It's happening now. We're asking for it. And I would like to know, how are you going to supervise these transient people that are coming in and out? And I know a lot of you have been here as long or longer than I have. You may remember back in the 70s, we had a serious drug problem, destroyed some families, destroyed some people. And a lot of it was attributed to people coming in, either boaters or skiers or golfers, of course. It had to be somebody who is here for a good reason. And they were bringing, shuttling drugs, and some really, really good people, because there was money, really good people were destroyed. Families were damaged badly. I want to know how we're going to stay ahead of that kind of a thing when we don't even know who's living next door to us. You know, Mr. Rogers always said, who are the people in your neighborhood? Who knows? I sat in my living room Sunday morning with my cup of coffee, watching the house next door to Larry, where there had been cars coming and going all weekend. 4 cars in the driveway. Saturday evening, there was the same 4 cars, 2 from Ohio, 2 from Michigan. But crowding the street on both sides, parking in and out, off and on, there was maybe another 10 cars, Saturday evening, Saturday night. And so Sunday morning, I watched these 4 cars load up. 10 people, it's a 3-bedroom house, Mosier's old house. 3-bedroom. 10 people came out, got in their cars and drove away. And I thought, is anybody watching this besides me that knows the old neighbor? I guess it's my fault this has gotten out of hand. I was busy at home, raising my family, doing my job. Kindergarten is not an easy job, is it, Nick? Or John? Couple of my boys. I should have been down here making sure that everybody was doing their job. I think we missed the boat, and is it too late to correct it? And I seriously do want to hear something about how we're going to control what we have right now. I'd like to hear how we're going to control it. Is there a way to cap it for now? No more until we get some intelligent discussion and some answers, and maybe somebody will do some research, somebody who's more knowledgeable than the kindergarten teacher. I guess I have not talked to Larry, but I'll try to next time. Because I love what he had to say.
No, he does.
This time it wasn't over the backyard fence, it was
Hey, you guys never seen me here. You owe me about an hour and a half the way I said. So I'm just saying, although I did bend Matt's here at the Memorial Day breakfast, we just happened to be sitting next to him and Jane. It's just.
I drew the lucky seat.
Yeah, I know, I said, I don't think you finished your breakfast, so anyway.
All right.
Sorry about
Anyone
that,
else
by the
have
way.
their-
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Are there any policy and procedures currently for short-term rentals?
There. We contracted with a firm that hunts down all the short-term rentals in town so that we can get them licensed. They search all the different websites. We do have some rules in place.
So we've had an ordinance in place for
Couple
4 years now probably, and it's been amended once, most recently early this year, 2021, or late last year. We started the process late last year in the fall after we received some noise complaints and concerns about recycling and trash being left out and et cetera. So we revised the ordinance, and as Larry did say, we did have in the draft ordinance, the single family, one of the draft ordinances is a single family, but council, you guys did take that single family out. But we did briefly talk about caps, but we decided at that time we wanted to see, once we've contracted with Harmari to see to the extent of what the problem is, with actual numbers, of how many licenses we actually have. And then we would re-examine after this year. That was kind of the way we were going. But we do have an ordinance, and it's been in place for about 4 years, requires us to get a license to follow certain rules, especially when it comes to noise and trash and other things, but there's no cap on the
And
number of.
there's no obligation to tell the neighbors that this is what you're gonna be doing.
There is no obligation for that. They do have to have a local agent, and then they have to post that, right, Jeff? They have to post that on their door, contact information on their door.
That's not happening.
No. Next
So
door.
I don't
to me,
know
they
who's
have it
supposed to
posted.
enforce that, but it's not happening.
Mhm.
And the other issue was the boarding house that I think got sorted out, that we got caught in. The house where there was 5 people, then there's 10 people, then there's a camper, and then 2 tents showed up, and there's 8 bunk beds in the garage. And that, this is
Just a
a
little
previous
side note for you.
administration.
My neighbors who live there all year round have 6 cars in the driveway, 15 people living in the house on occasion. Cars come and go from out of state. They're really nice people. Their friends are really nice.
But you know that, and it's
I don't
the
know their
same
friends.
friends that are coming.
I don't know their friends.
I would say about if
You
If
can't
you suspect
control-
certain houses aren't complying with the regulation, the only way we can do something about it is if we know about it. We can't spend the time every day spending hours circling around to see if houses have something on there. So if you suspect something is wrong, then you need to contact the zoning administrator's office or my office and say, hey, I believe this house is a short-term rental and they don't have a license. They don't have this posted on their door, and we'll take care of it that way. It's just, yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Thank you.
And also a few of the other things that you all talked about, which I sympathize with you about, lights on late at night or noise in the backyard or big fires. We have ordinances against all that. You just need to the police know if it's after hours, and they'll come and respond to that. Just because it's a short-term rental, or whether it's a year-round resident, there are certain things that aren't supposed to happen. So there's a lot of these things you're talking about, there already are ways to handle those, whether it's a short-term rental or a full-year resident. So, but we have to know about them, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody's having a party out back.
That we live in single family home neighborhoods. That's what we moved into and now they're completely changed.
I understand.
That's the issue.
I understand that, but people talk a lot about the behavioral problems, and there are ways to deal with those. I understand what you're saying about the other side of it. It's hard to legislate against having different people next door to you. I mean, I understand what you all are
It
saying. and-
changes the culture. I think that's what we're getting at.
Mhm. And we are working on it. I mean, this is an ongoing discussion with us a lot, and we're happy to have you guys here and weigh in on your side of it, because we hear the other side of it too.
There's the other piece of it, I mean, this is just this, because the other piece is the whole housing that people can live in
Absolutely,
and work.
absolutely, absolutely. And this complicates it, and
And
obviously
that's
we
what I'm
realize
saying,
that.
it's exacerbating the big picture, because now there's
Yep.
less housing available.
But what Bill said is super important, because if the bills go through at the state level,
Out of our
our
hands.
hands, we can't do anything about it. We can't make any rules about any of it if those bills pass. So it's pretty important for the way you guys feel, that local control, because they won't put controls on it.
I'm glad to see the topic
Yeah,
bubbling
yeah,
again. It's an important
it
topic.
is.
You bet.
The whole reason why we signed up for this service is to get a better handle on how many we have in town and where they are. Because it's something that we, as council members or even as staff, we don't know. We will now have a handle on that. The idea of notification of neighbors when someone applies for a short-term rental license, to me, makes a lot of sense. And in fact, I'm kind of surprised that it didn't come up in previous discussions because it seems so obvious. Our code requires that notification be sent to neighbors to put up a fence or to make any other kind of, property change. We should look at that. And I think we should look at it soon. And I really appreciate, Larry, what you said. You don't want to complain, but I would argue, please do. Whether it's at 2 o'clock in the morning with a fire or excessive noise, the only way that the police department will know what's going on is if they get those calls. So one is the more complex cultural, how our neighborhood's changing, and we want to deal with that. But to do that, the more information we have, and believe me, I won't, and I don't think council will take it as whining or complaining. You need to report back what's happening, because that feeds this whole process of understanding how much it's changing and how much it's deteriorating and what we need to do. So let's get the word out to call the police. Sorry, chief. Call the police and complain. Call here and let us know.
And his
because
personal phone number.
in the absence of feedback, we don't have a gauge for how serious it is.
But it has to, on our end, it has to be in violation of one of our ordinances.
Right.
I mean, people can have bonfires at 2 in the morning if the smoke stays on their property. So we will enforce, I have officers 24/7, 365 days. So we will respond to the complaints, we'll document it, and we'll report back to Victor, who will report back to council. That's why we're here.
Final word.
I would like to suggest a short-term idea that would be called Harmony in the Neighborhood. And we would come up with like a sheet that could be left in each rental home that would be what we suggest in the neighborhood to keep things going and to keep everybody happy. And then let people know that this is what is expected of you in Harbor Springs. And if you violate this, you may get a knock at your door. These people may not
So,
even know
Jeff,
that this is
we already have something where we require them to leave a copy of the ordinances and the short-term rental there, what they're expected to follow.
Is it cumbersome to read though? Like what if we just had bullet points,
Jeff.
We kept it to
Jeff,
one page. We require property owners that are operating short-term rental to have 2 things posted at their property. One is something posted on the exterior notifying if it's at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the evening and the police have to knock on the door and nobody answers, they should have the local agent posted with a phone number. And the idea of the local agent is someone who can be at the property within an hour-ish to help address any situations. We also require that the property owner post somewhere inside for the renters themselves a list of many of the ordinances that we felt renters needed to be aware of: noise ordinances, our smoke ordinance, fireworks, any of those things that may potentially impact neighboring property owners. We tried to keep it to one page so that it wouldn't be too cumbersome to read, and then it would be easy for the property owner to put in a binder or set somewhere that it would be easily viewable to the renters. And
Can you tell me who we is? I don't know who you are.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm Jeff Grimm. I do the zoning administration for the
Okay,
city.
thank you.
No problem.
Jeff, have we done any kind of audit? Because I do not believe that short-term rentals are posting externally. When I walk around houses that I know are short-term rentals, I don't see any posting at all.
We have not gone around visiting the short-term rental properties to do an inventory of how many of them are posting these things internally or externally. And it's tough to say, but it also comes down to a time constraint issue. We only have so many staff people that can do so many things. So,
You know how many licenses we're up to approximately about now?
Somewhere between 50 and 80. I'd have to look specifically to see, but it's in that neighborhood,
Within the city limits.
within the city limits, yes.
You know, the few rules that you guys have really are unenforceable right now. And there's, in the short version here, of the whole crux to this thing is stop any further till we look at this ordinance and until we figure this out. We don't have any restriction. We can have a whole town full of them. We have no regulation. And yet we continue to issue licenses to actual business activities in a residential zone districts. It makes no sense. I'm sorry. That's just my point.
I just want to comment again, please, if you see a violation, call us, all right? We're blessed to have a 24/7 police department. So if you see something, please call 911.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
We will have an officer respond. Like I said, we will document it and go from there. And if there's enforcement action to be taken, we'll take it. I'm going to send an email when I get back to the office tonight to let all the officers know that we'll probably get some calls.
So I have a question on that line. If there's something going on in a home, are you allowed to go in and find out what's going on and put a call to it? Or is, because it's a private home, you can't do anything about it?
We cannot go inside, maybe with consent, but not just to go in based on some suspicion. That unfortunately, that would get me in a lot of trouble.
Okay, so
We could knock at the door, we can make contact with the owner, whatever the violation is, or whatever the call is, and we can go from there. But just to go in the home to try to find something,
no, I mean, if I called you and said, there's people in this house on my side and there's people in the other house on the other side, and they're all running back and forth. And that's been going on all night. What can you do about it? Could you actually pull the people out of the house, or
I would recommend we take this that specific question outside of city council. We have to focus on the policy here, but if you have a specific question, yeah, maybe ask Kyle afterwards, just because.
okay, I just don't want history to repeat itself, because this is something I went through
Absolutely, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
with a new baby in the house.
If there's a specific question, though, you should contact city. We'll
you can stop it and see me. You will have a good talk.
Also, take a look at your convoluted definition of single family. While you guys took that off, read the darn definition. It's almost a moot point that you took it out because you basically can do whatever you want anyway in the definition. You could still have up to 8 people, non-family members, I mean, when you read the thing, you say, it talks about everything except a single family. Please take a look at that, folks, please.
That definition was revised in 2016. It's not flag.
All right, moving along.
I have one more question about family. What constitutes a family? 3
No idea.
teenagers and the parents are in Chicago?
That's a big question today.
What constitutes a family?
You tell me.
Read the definition, anything goes.
All right, thank you very much for your input. We'll keep working on it.
All right, moving on to item 3E. So this is an agenda item that Councilmember Rondell had brought up, and is more specifically geared toward commercial uses at Ford Park. I kind of went and just did a little summary for the council on what uses are happening at Ford Park and some of the issues that might come up. So as you probably know, last summer was one of the busiest seasons at Ford Park for parking tickets, activity. We had I believe a combination of factors for that. One of them was COVID-19. More people were outdoors and boating, part of it. The other was that the ferry operation was going on, so we had a little more increased activity. And also with the IBS construction, we just had a few more, cars parking there. But overall, we didn't have many complaints from the public about significant congestion issues. We had So some concerns here and there, but it wasn't anything out of proportion. As far as commercial activity, well, we did have sign a lease with Dock and Dredge to locate its barge on the eastern portion of Ford Park. That was because there was no other property where they could locate, and they do our city docks for us. And so Harbor Commission and Council felt that it would be too cumbersome, and expensive for us to find someone else to do it, or if they relocate elsewhere. So they decided that locating at Ford Park would be a good option. Residents had concerns about the aesthetics of the barge and some other issues such as lifting up and down its boom. We kind of resolved that at the last Harbor Commission meeting. There wasn't really any complaints or really worries about that causing congestion at the park because they're off to the side. They don't really interfere with, especially because they're not allowed to be there in the summer months. They really don't interfere with the summertime activity. However, there were some concerns in general about allowing a commercial business on a property that's a public park. So that was one aspect. The other aspect we have is the real issue that Councilmember Rondell brought up was the kind of the launching of the boats and the commercial businesses. How many launches they use at Fort Park. We charged a residential person $35 season permit to launch their boats, or $5 per launch. If you're a non-resident, it's about $60, I think. For in-town businesses, they can get a permit for $400 season permit. And if you're an out-of-town business, you can get a $600 permit. And so the question really was, how many boats are they launching? Is the price they're paying fair for how many boats they launch? Should we increase that? Is there a way to keep track of the amount of boats and times that they're launching those boats? My thoughts on that, I don't really know exactly how council wants to proceed. I mean, I can see that there could be a concern with if we don't have a legitimate rationale for why we're charging a different rate for people who are using a commercial entity to launch their boats than if someone from the public. What's the rationale for why they get potentially a lower rate? I looked back in the history for Harbor Commission and council meetings, and I did find out that we reinstated launch permit fees in the year 2000. And so we hadn't had them for at least 10, 12 years. We reinstated them. At that time, there wasn't a special permit for commercial use that came into play in 2006 or 2007. The minutes weren't really clear about that. So I could do more in-depth research on that, but I couldn't really find a rationale as to why we are allowing a separate rate for commercial versus public residential. And then another issue going on with potential future issue but future thing at Ford Park is there's been for at least 6 years, I think since 2014, 2015, council and the chamber have been looking at using Ford Park to locate the chamber. They're no longer, the lease with the Blackbird Museum is ending. So Ford Park had been something they've been eyeing and that the city's been eyeing for a while now. 2015, 14, it couldn't happen because the funding wasn't there. We did not get the grant. Now there's potential to find some of that money from the chamber if a long-term lease could be signed. So this would add another use to the Ford Park, though it wouldn't be as intensive as some of the other uses. So that's something that may be coming up soon here. And those are the main uses going on at Ford Park, aside from regular users launching their own boats and kayaks, et cetera. Some people don't really walk around and picnic that area because the grass has been so saturated, and it's really, in the summertime, it's just, there's a lot of cars there. The circulation is not the best for launching boats there. So it hasn't really been a pedestrian, really friendly type of park, but it's really a place to jump off to go onto the water for most people. The other potential, where we're looking into deeds and agreements that we have with the state on this. The state we do have grant agreements with the state. One of those agreements essentially says that the property cannot be converted from public use into public outdoor use into something else, to other type of use. And the question is, do these activities, do they constitute converting the entire property into a non-public outdoor use? So at what point for the uses that we add, in my opinion, some of these uses, such as a chamber located there, really aren't changing the nature of the property for the grant purposes. But at what point do you change that use? The state has probably a different perspective on that. They'll say any use that's not public outdoor use is a conversion of the entire property. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at deeds there. So what our deeds say, and we'll have more for that for council at the next meeting. But I guess my question to council is, what do we really want to see on this? I know that Councilmember Rondell, you brought this up, but how do we want to proceed? Do we want, what questions do you want answered? Do we want to look into the commercial launch fee increase, or, do you want to do a study? Do we want to ask the commercial business owners to, keep track if they volunteer, so how many boats they launch? So I guess, really what is the concern here, and what's council's direction?
Well, I have a few, obviously. I think we had asked for some data. I know at Harbor Commission, they did, from Irishes and Wallstroms in particular, because they're the bigger users of boats in and out. So we would have something to base our rates on. We'd have some idea how many launches they're doing, not how many different boats, because many of the boats are launched over and over again. But how many times do they actually launch a boat in the summer? Because I think the rates were just randomly set. We doubled them last year. They were 200 and 300 until, I think it was last year, where we doubled them to 4 and 6. I think we need that data so we know what we're talking about in terms of usage of the launch ramps. It's a lot of wear and tear on city property, the roads to get the boats there. And it's not that I'm opposed to them launching there. It's just, I think we need to know when we allow commercial people to use our public lands, which are paid for with tax dollars, that we're being reimbursed for that somehow. Because obviously they're charging the people to put their boats in. So for us just to gratis give that to them really doesn't make a lot of sense to me when we're looking for ways to finance our parks and launch ramps.
One of the suggestions I had in there related to that was, to make it fair to everyone, each boat owner has to pay $5 for a daily launch or buy a season pass. So if there's 100 boat operators using, IBS, for example, and they're launching all season long, then they all should get required to get that $35 or $60 season pass. Because then if we have a different rationale for, it has to be the same rationale there, unless there's a justification for why those particular boat owners, not the commercial business itself, but the boat owners are given a different rate than the other residents. There may be an issue there with some potential legal issue there.
I think it should be fair. I guess that's always my thing that I come back to, is why should the boat owners that Irish or Wallstrom put in only pay what they pay for a launch when people who live in town who launch their own boats pay more? That doesn't make sense to me. And the other spin-off from this for me is the use of public parks by commercial people. How do we make that decision who gets to do that? I don't know how the decision was made, or if we were even asked whether commercial people could use the public launch ramp. I wasn't on, and I don't know if that, if they asked if they could use it, or if they just assumed that that was okay to use it. Anybody remember?
I talked to Jim Bartlett, and there was a decision, and there wasn't asked.
Or by Harbor?
Because council has to approve the fees, so there was.
Well, the fees.
Yeah, so there, at one point, there was a decision made as to allowing them, commercial businesses, to do that. The rationale is just what I could not find in the minutes, the reasoning for that.
I think they asked Harbor Commission said, yeah, no problem.
Right.
And then it came to us. And
Said no problem.
no, it was no problem.
Yeah. But I think it needs to be fair. I have a real issue with stuff that isn't fair. And I think that, and I also think council needs to come up with some criteria and some parameters about why they let certain commercial places use our public lands. Because I think we could get into real trouble. Somebody else comes to request something and we say, no, we don't want you to do that, but we'll let this person do that. I think we need to look at why we let them use the public lands. And I think there's good reasons, certainly. I mean, we gotta get the boats in the water. I don't have a problem with that, but I think that's something that council needs to look at.
I think sort of to address that, there's 2 permits or whatever available to launch boats at Ford Park, and whoever applies for them gets the permit. And in this case, I think it was, am I right on that?
There's 3 commercial
or 3
there's
commercial.
three.
And the outfitter takes
The
one of
outfitter
them,
took 4.
and then the 2 marinas take the other 2.
And then there's other things like charters.
Yeah, and what about the charters that put in there?
Charter's got its own permit.
Yeah, it's different type, like the
Charter's
fishing,
separate.
yeah, it's separate, but yeah.
Okay,
So it's kind of a first come, first served.
Okay.
If Burt Lake Marina wanted to launch boats here, all they have to do is apply to you for.
Right, and
Irish or
their
Wallstrom.
permit is more expensive than
Right.
one for Irish or Wallstrom,
because
because
they're
they're
in
not in the
They're in
city.
town.
So we do get.
So we have a cap number of permits that we give, which I didn't know that. And-
I'll double check that. I know that for any request that hasn't been approved before, so for example, I can approve as a city manager, any request that's already been approved by the Harbor Commission and council historically. So for example, IBS comes or the outfitter comes, and you'll have it, but any new requests have to go to the Harbor Commission. I'll have to look to see if there's a cap. And obviously there's cap on things like ferry services and charters, and tour boats and et cetera, stuff like that. But as far as how many, I don't have that exact number in front of me. So that's part of the research I can do.
I think there is some language
Yep.
that there's a certain number of sailing operations that are allowed to work from our docks and a certain number of fishing operations, but it is limited.
If I don't know about launch permits is what I'm saying. So for commercial launch, is there a limit to commercial launch permits? Or not? You get what I'm saying?
I think we just accommodated
Yeah.
the commercial operations of the city.
And I could just foresee other people asking to do that. And I think we have to have some kind of parameters, or the Harbor Commission, whoever's making those choices, about how they make those choices. Is it, do city ones get first priority, or, if someone has had it for 10 years, do they get first priority? That kind of stuff. I just think if we can set some clearer things, we will keep ourselves out of trouble. And it could be a lot fairer. And also, I'm curious on the commercial uses down there that you're looking into with the state. Because I know there's issues down at City Dock, and JB told me that was different than Ford Park. But I'd like to understand, since we took state money at both places, why the ferry can dock at Ford Park, but they can't dock at City, that kind of stuff. And I don't understand the difference between those.
I think it's language in the leases.
We're still looking
From the
into
state.
those.
Yes, and certainly the city dock is different from the floating docks that are right off of the harbor master area.
The
Because
city.
those docks were purchased solely by the city, and the state has no control over them.
And that's the shopper stuff. Am I right? The shopper dock, is that what they call it?
Well, I call it the floating docks.
Oh, okay, the ones, yes, I know what you mean.
So
Okay,
those were paid for wholly with city money, and the state does not control them. And so it gives the city some leeway, at least in terms of giving benefit, some favoritism to local residents that you can do if the state's. So that has proved to be, from the city standpoint, a beneficial method of owning these properties. Because the state, their regulations are forever, and they are very jealous of any local control over those facilities.
What I remember from the last Harbor Commission meeting, we setting rates, was that they agreed it would be good to have some basis for setting rates, because we doubled them. Then is that too much? Is that too little? We didn't know. And what I remember the conclusion was to ask all of the commercial users of Ford Park to they track these numbers, to give us an annual report on how many launches they do. So that we can size the problem and better understand it.
that's what I remember too.
Yeah, because they might be using it more than the citizens should.
Yeah, I just think
We just don't know.
Yeah.
We just should know when we're making decisions about that.
That gives you what you need.
Do we answer your questions, Victor? or no?
So from what I'm gathering here, ask the commercial use businesses like IBS, Wallstrom, if they're willing to share that data with us. The second one is to develop some sort of policy or set of criteria for how we evaluate when commercial uses use public lands.
I think we should. I think we should work on that.
For those, is that fair? Is that what you guys want?
That's what I'm hearing. I mean, I'd like to see the quantitative information about how the park is getting used. Defining that, the policy, that's a broader issue,
I think that.
which might be helped by having the information about the specifics about how it's getting used. It might become clearer from that. So I'd wait on the policy, but I would request information from the commercial users on what their actual usage is.
My one caveat, and I don't know, Jim, if you want to correct me on that, is that I think in one respect, the data is going to be irrelevant, because if there's, let's say there's, they're using it 1,000 times or 500 times, doing 500 launches. Really, what we're looking at is a rationale as to why we're giving one boat owner a different rate than another boat owner. And the rationale matters more than the actual number of launches.
To me, the rationale is one step beyond just having the data. We don't have the data. We don't know how it's being used.
I guess what I'm saying is, even if we come back with the data,
Right.
that would you want to change, still have a different rate for a boat owner that is using IBS, for example, to launch their boat than someone who's launching it themselves?
I don't know.
Basically,
What would be-
you
what would
need
the
to ask
rationale
the
be?
two, how many boats do they put in at the marina? Or at the launch versus launching them with their hoist? It's black and white. They got a hoist, they put the 40 footers in, 30, 40 footers. Everything under 30 foot, they launch. So whether they're on a mooring, whether they're in the basin or wherever, you gotta have a number. How many boats do they launch? How many boat owners get launched outside of their property? I mean, should be one or the other. If they're not putting them in with their hoist, they're launching them with a trailer. One or the other. So
Well, it's the valet service that's really ramped things up.
Right.
Yeah, I think
It's not so much the big boats launch. I mean, they put that in at their hoist, generally, the big guys.
No, but to help what Victor's asking, if we're looking at developing with set fee, it would be the guys that are on the moorings, all these personal boats that they're putting in, which, are the smaller, let's say the smaller size boats. They're not getting launched by the big hoists. They're like what Wallstrom and Irish are hauling down right now. They're all getting launched by the hoist. Everything else, all the smaller boats are already in. They're set. So we're gonna charge.
But it's more, John, it's more the valet service where they
Valet,
put them
come
in
out 10
constantly
times
all
a
summer. Like somebody will, correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody will call and say, I want my boat launched today at 10 o'clock. So they launch it, then they pick it back up late in the day, take it back out, do it again the next weekend.
Right,
or
but it's the
whatever.
same kind of thing.
But they're
It's
not
what they're
using the launch.
launching, outside of the hoist.
But they're not using our launch ramp. What I'm looking at is the ones going in at Ford Park on our public property. Those are the ones I'm talking about, not the ones that they put in with their hoist.
One boat might come in and out 20 times in a summer, 20 times a month,
That's if,
one boat.
Dave, hold on one second.
So for me, it makes more sense to look at Victor's question of why do we have different rates for different people? Why? Because Wallstrom's putting a boat in, if we broke it down, did the $400 we charge them, and they put in 400 boats in the course of the summer, why are we charging that launch $1 where we're charging a person who put their boat in $5? That isn't fair.
$400 isn't covering.
No, and I think we need the data so we know how many, but the
You
real
can't do the
question
math
is,
until you have the numbers.
but the real question is, why should there be any difference? If Irish's launches 75 people's boats with their valet service, why shouldn't those 75 people buy the $35 or the $60 launch fee permit, just like everybody else does? And then we'd have to figure out how to know those boats were being launched that were paid for. But I don't understand why we've made a difference between that. So,
There is someone there on the weekends that's a city employee, Mary Jane,
Yes, yeah.
that would know or could count for you, at least on Saturday and Sunday, which is the busiest time, a boat launch of, is it commercial or is it the valet, or is it a private person going in and out? You're already paying to do that, or to sit there.
Michael, I know you're here.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments? I know your hand was raised.
Yes, I'm Michael Esposito. I'm the president of Irish Boat Shop. So there's a multiple issues that you're talking about. If you go back, at least as far as I go, which is 26 years, I believe, Victor, we've always paid a launch fee as long as I've been here. I could be wrong, but that's my recollection. It was like $50 for the longest time, and then it started to increase. The commercial use of public property is much more prevalent than you're giving the world credit for. We all drive down the street, right? Every business in Harbor Springs uses public roads, whether they're state or local. So the launch ramp, at least going way back, is a public piece of property. It's for public use. Irish Boat Shop and other businesses pay property taxes. So we're members of the Harbor Springs community. We have some right to use that launch ramp. Now, what the quantity is, we can talk about. There's some level of right to access to that land. I think in going back, whatever, 20 years, both operations, Wallstrom's and Irish, we launched some boats through there. I couldn't tell you how many it is off the top of my head. And so the business license was similar to what a seasonal resident or a resident would pay, right? They pay $35. You don't keep track of how many times they launch their boat. They can launch it once, or they can launch it 1,000 times. It's a flat rate. And that's what the business license, I believe, was intended to be. So we could launch boats through there. Now, have the uses changed? Absolutely. Is your point of the valet boats, are they different? They're very different. That could be looked at too, but the concept of saying commercial people can't use public property doesn't really work in the real world. If you want to keep track of how many boats we put in, we can do that. I don't actually keep track of every boat we launch through that launch ramp because it's not relevant to me right now, but if we needed to keep track of it, we could. The reason we use Ford Park a lot of times is it's simply more efficient to put small boats in through the launch ramp than it is through our operation. Plain and simple. The valet program, again, is very different. I can get into that if you can treat it differently. Right now, the valet program is 25 boats. It's not hundreds, it's 25 boats. Last year it was 28 boats. The year before that it was 27 boats. So there's a physical limit to how many boats we can provide that service for. And that service was established because there aren't any slips in Harbor Springs, or prior to 08, there were no slips. So that was just a way to get more people in the water. Ford Park, the intention of that park is to get people in the water. Now, my valet customers, for example, if you don't let me put them through there, somebody else is gonna. I'm an established commercial business. I have a brick and mortar building, a new one. I pay property taxes, we have a parking lot. You can keep track of this. I can tell you there's 10 people launching boats for hire through Ford Park, and you don't even know about it. So those boats are gonna go in the water. If pricing is to control the number of boats going in the water, you're kind of going down the wrong road. Pricing is a way to increase income to the city, and that might be a great thing. Maybe, the parks can be improved and all those things. But it isn't a way to control the frequency. People have boats, they want them in the water. That place is basically open 24/7. Boats are gonna go in the water. It's a matter of how we manage it. So I think there's a lot of valid concerns, especially if you want to talk about valet, because it's a very different service. Your suggestion of a valet customer has to have a $35 license, I wouldn't consider that unreasonable. But there is a reason that at least the two commercial businesses that have been here a long time had some form of flat rate to use that facility. Now, whether that logic still applies or not is up to you, but it's a pretty solid logic. All of these boats, regardless of who owns them and where they are, have to get into that lake. And just like we use launch ramps, public launch ramps at different lakes, we happen to use this one more. If you think you have problems, go to Charlotte Lake. They have huge problems with their launch ramp, but that's a whole other issue. I don't believe I've ever paid a fee in Charlotte Lake, and we run almost as many boats through that ramp, but they manage it differently. So I don't know if that answers questions or raises questions, but I think there are some logics as to why this has happened. The bigger problem in Ford Park is not so much the amount of use. That facility is old. It was designed decades ago, and it has not changed with the changes in use. There were no kayaks there 15 years ago. wasn't a ferry boat 2 years ago, right? The uses have changed, which is fantastic, but the park hasn't changed. So that's one of the things to consider. Thanks. Or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you.
That's good.
We do have someone on Zoom. David, you have your hand raised if you can speak if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. David Zibble, I'm at 565 State Street. And I don't have a boat downtown here, but I just wanted to weigh in a little bit. Is if I did have a boat, I don't have a truck where I could launch it. So if I was storing it at Irish's or Wallstrom's, I would depend on them to launch the boat for me. So I don't think it really makes a big difference whether I can launch my own boat as a private resident or if I'm paying somebody else to launch the boat for me. I think we have to take that into account too. A lot of people might have a boat, but they can't launch it themselves. So they rely on the commercial operators, and they shouldn't have to pay more just because they're relying on a commercial operator rather than their own truck. That's all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, David.
So I think what we need is to gather the data that we can and beat this up with the Harbor Commission and see where it goes. I think you're bringing up the issue and having us look at it is good. But we don't have enough data.
At this stage,
any kind of action.
At this stage, we're just trying to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, but I do think it, and I don't disagree with you, but I think it does come down to maybe every boat that gets launched, every person that owns needs to buy a launch ramp permit. And that would make it simpler for us by far, and maybe simpler for Irish and Wallstrom's. If it was just, if they're in-town residents, they're 35, and if they're not, it's 60 for the season. And it can be launched as many times as it wants to be, which is what it is for all of us that have boats that launch them. I think, to me, that makes the most sense because it's fair. It's
I
the
agree.
same.
And that's why I was saying I don't know necessarily if collecting that data is necessary. Where I was coming from was the boat owner technically will pull out, maybe IBS can pull out the season pass on behalf of the boat owner, but
Right.
the boat owner, each boat owner for their boat has a season pass, $35, $60. IBS is not pulling out the pass on behalf of IBS. They're pulling it out on behalf of the boat owner. And that way, no data is necessarily, unless you want to, if you guys actually want to, I just don't think the data is going to give us the rationale, make
I
us.
don't think it's gonna give us the rationale. I think it would be interesting to know how many boats are launched by non-boat owners. I think that would be an interesting factor to have. But in terms of setting the fee, I think the fee should be the same for no matter who's launching the boat. Whoever, I mean, we have several boats. We only need one launch permit. So if somebody has two boats, they only need one launch permit. But each family, each owner has to have a permit if they're gonna use the ramp.
Right. So you just hit the nail on the head. That's what a commercial license is. It's just like you having a season pass and paying $35. A commercial license is a set fee, whatever you set it at, for us to use that facility. It's the exact same thing.
No, I think I can only launch my own boats. I
But
can't
you can
go.
launch it as many times as you want.
But they're all my boats, where they're not Irish's boats, they're 25 other people's boats. Some of them are not residents, some of them probably are, I don't know. So there is a little difference to that, Mike. I mean, you're launching a lot of different people's boats. I launch just my own boats. So I'm not gonna launch 25 boats in a day on the 3rd of July. I think it's by person, at least that's the way we have it set up now, is families have to buy launch permits. So I just think that makes more sense.
So I can collect it, I can ask IBS and Wallstrom and others for the data, can bring a rationale to council, potential policy.
I think it's Harbor, I think it should start at the Harbor Commission. I don't think it should come to us. I think it
This all started at the Harbor Commission when, at the last meeting where fees were.
They do have a meeting on Wednesday, so I can bring this up to them.
I'd say go to them and let them make a recommendation for us. I don't know. I like Victor's idea. If they want to launch their boat, they can buy a, you know, whoever's launching, the boat owner's responsibility to
Yeah.
have a launch pass.
I just think
We
that makes
sell
sense.
Irish or whomever wants a launch pass, a commercial pass, they can launch one boat or 1,000 boats. If we think we should charge more for that.
No, I lost you, man. If you charge the individual boat owners, if you have them buy their pass.
The
their launch-
valet people.
Right. And I'm
Valet.
talking about the valets that are going in and out. I'm not talking about the seasonal launch.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so if Irish is gonna, if the person is, if Irish is gonna launch a boat on the launch ramp for the season,
Right.
that person can buy a permit. Irish
Oh, you're
really wouldn't
talking-
have to buy any launch permit if all their boat owners had to have one,
Okay. so-
right? I mean, that's, if individual boat owners had to have them.
I was under the impression you were trying to get the people like the valets that are.
Well, the
in and
valets
out,
are the
in and
main
out.
ones that are in and out all the time, and that could be up for discussion, certainly, if
But
it's a
the,
once a
you know,
season
spring
launch.
in and fall out.
Yeah, that could be
They're already
on
paying
Irish,
for a permit
right, right,
for those.
yeah, if Irish is gonna pay for a permit, yeah.
For their commercial,
Mhm.
yeah,
I like the idea, there's an Harbor Commission meeting.
yeah.
Let's kick it to them and, I mean, it started there. Let's see what the feeling is today. That would be my approach. If we're gonna make a change, it would have to come from them anyway, so let's get it back to them now. Doesn't have to, but we have commission, we
It
have
would be
boards
good-
and
They need
commissions
to
for
weigh
a
in on
reason.
it, certainly, they need to.
They're more
weigh in on it.
educated than we are and spend more time on the topic, so I think we should respect that.
For Harbor Commission it is.
Consensus?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, moving on quickly, city managers report, a few updates here. The Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals has ruled for the state, the city, county, in the Adawa lawsuit against the city. The court found that a reservation had not been established for the tribe back in mid-19th century. We anticipate the tribe will appeal this decision. I think they already expressed they will.
They've asked for the entire Sixth Circuit to weigh in on it. They're asking for a rehearing, in fact.
Okay.
Ian.
So this is, how many years has it been now? We're in the sixth.
2015.
They're not.
Sixth year, so for now, another victory for the cities, but of course, this will drag on some longer. We've conducted 4 interviews for the Parks Director position. We did 2 follow-up interviews today, and we'll be making an offer soon, so we'll have a new director soon. Arbor Day Fest was a great success, so thanks to Tree Board, Dana, and all others, Lucas and Ben Beeling, who made that successful. It was a great event. Bay Street and Third Street have been paved, so those projects are essentially done. There's still some minor touch-ups that need to happen, but those projects are done essentially. And we have installed our new equipment. We have a camera and some different mics, so we have a better Zoom, YouTube experience for those listeners who are participating by other options, remote options. And, you know, I really didn't have many meetings because I was on vacation for about 9 days, but we did have a couple planning commission DDA meetings. You heard one of the site plan amendment here earlier. There's also a special land use request at 117 West Main Street, which was the Harbor ice cream store, and they're expanding a little bit to do some food as well. DDA is discussing, their main topic right now is improvements to Merchants Walkway. So there's a fountain back there and look at the break and the sidewalks. And the Marina Park Committee reviewed progress of the park's design improvements. We're still working out some little details here and there, but essentially it's going forward. So that's really all I have.
Can you tell me where we are with the sales down there?
Yeah, that was a question I was gonna have. I was under the impression that we approved the sales. But then I heard back from others saying that they thought we didn't approve the sales, straight sales. And so there's been a, seems like a little difference of opinion. So council, what?
I don't know if we approved them or not, but the scuttlebutt on the street is no sales.
I was under the impression that
We
said
did
yes.
approve them on the, when we looked at
Lucas
the
and I
site.
talked about it.
We did.
But the
We
top
don't
of the
remember
street
who it
is.
is. I know, I
yeah,
know.
no say.
But what, I guess, the problem was the foundation, they're not foundations, but whatever.
All their foundations.
Is that what they're called? The foundation footings weren't adequate, right? Am I remembering right?
Well, there's an
I'm not
issue
an
with
expert
water
in
table,
this
kind of how things all went together, but we talked about it quite extensively.
here.
And then, on the one site plan that we did, that kind of, they went away.
They're still on there.
They're still on the site.
Because Lucas and I talked about it several weeks ago, and I'm like, I don't think we approved that. So,
I was confident we did, but that's why.
I
thanks for bringing it
remember
up.
we did, if it could be done right, because the first pass was an abject
Right.
failure. So if we could get them in at the right spacing.
so I
properly.
remember, and I thought we didn't agree to it because we still were unsure where they were going, what was gonna happen in the
I'll
park.
go back to the
I was gonna
recording.
go back to the minutes and.
Well, that's, I mean, since we're here right now, I guess we don't really need to go back to recording. What is, do we want to?
Well, can we make it happen with decent foundations? I mean, they didn't work last year with the
Time.
foundations.
It's
that
a matter of timing, no.
Seems unlikely for this season.
Realistically.
Yeah.
Wait, next year.
Well, we shouldn't do them if we can't do them right. I mean, I think to put them up and have them.
Well, the water table's going back down, so if we waited another year, you'd be able to get the footings in deep enough. And maybe by then the idea will go away, or we'll have a different idea for the park. I don't know.
We heard that.
Any word on the umbrellas?
They're here.
They're here, so.
And the park improvements look great,
Yeah.
but everything was good down there.
We got 5 initially, but maybe if we're not gonna do the shade sales, we negotiate.
We'll talk about that at the Marina Park. Committee, yeah.
It doesn't sound like we can get them in this year
At this
in a
point,
timely
yeah.
fashion, and I don't think we should just slap them up. That doesn't make any sense. What?
Like we did.
Yeah,
last year.
I don't think we should do that, so. We need to make a motion though, because we did vote that in, I'm pretty sure. But whatever is.
I don't know that you need a motion. It was not an ordinance or anything that we approved a site plan, and I think just by putting something off to the next year, everybody's in agreement.
I think the consensus is to let it pass.
We're not, right.
It sounds like we're not gonna do sales.
Sounds like we're not gonna sell. The word on the street is right, yeah.
Usually it is.
Usually it is.
Yeah.
The last issue is boards and commissions. We have 2 openings, one on the tree board and one on the Marina Park Committee. The 2 resignations, so I can advertise for those. Unless you have someone, any recommendations right now.
I've done nothing about either of those positions.
I'll do some advertising.
Yes, you advertise, I'll start asking that. You're done. New or old business?
Not from me.
Good.
Shape all looks good.
It
Yes, forgot to mention that, yeah.
Well done.
That's nice, there's always a crowd down there, which is good.
Flowers downtown, good.
Mary Ellen?
I noticed on this printout that the taste is supposed to be approved tonight, and that's why I'm here.
You approved it.
It was in the
You're good to go?
consensus agenda at the beginning.
With a
It
wave
was
of
in here for the other
pencil.
meetings with the consensus agenda.
We have now a consent agenda where anything that's not controversial
Hooray.
gets.
It's all the time.
Now you believe me when I tell you I'm a patient woman.
You could have been gone an hour and a half.
Well, I was very sympathetic to the neighborhoods in that issue.
Yeah.
So it's a concern for everyone that lives here, I'm sure. I just haven't had the bad experiences that some of these neighbors have had, or I'd have been here a long time ago.
All right, well, if no one's got anything tonight, I will close the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Yeah, really. You guys need a vote to get air conditioning.